The following program will make you want to grow things and experience new and wonderful dreams about your plants, garden, and garden design. Listener participation is always strongly advised. Good evening and welcome to Down the Garden Path with your host, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board, send us an email right now. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Welcome, everyone, to Down the Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is important and possible to have great gardens that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I am Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design. I've been designing beautiful landscapes for homeowners east of Toronto for over a decade. With me is my co host, Matthew Dressing. Welcome, Matthew.
Welcome, Joanne. Good evening, everyone. I'm Matthew Dressing, horticulturist and landscape designer, and owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. Natural Affinity is a landscape design and garden maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the Eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from each other, from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show. As always, we welcome your questions via social media, emails, or phone calls.
That's right. And we want to thank everybody who's tuning in right now for our live Down the Garden Path. And we want you to know that all of our past episodes, if you're a new listener or have only listened a few times, we've been doing this a while and we've got a ton of great content. And you can always check out past shows of Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app. Just search for Down the Garden Path. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you're notified of new content. And please like, share, or leave us a comment. So, welcome to the show, Matthew. Hello.
Hello, Joanne. Welcome and welcome, everyone. Yes, it's another wonderful Monday evening
I
here.
know, another week has flown by.
I cannot believe it's like the second week of June. It feels like it should be the second week of May. I just don't know where time is going.
I know, I
Who
know.
knows? Who knows? But how are things developing in your garden?
Oh my goodness, they're doing really well, I must say. I have not had a chance to babysit too much, but everything is looking lovely. I posted a few pictures. I love. I have many plants, and I design with many plants that one plant that does two things.
Hmm.
That's kind of a favorite thing for me. So I've been posting some pictures. I posted my summer snowflake viburnum is
Oh,
such a
yes.
nice size and fully in bloom, and it just looks amazing. And so I was saying to people that it blooms like that most of the summer, and then it will go red in the fall. So one plant does two things, and then I've got a variegated iris right now, which is a lovely period. It's blooming and the flower is very pretty, but we all know how short-lived those irises are. But that amazing foliage just, and I've had people stopping me wondering what that was even before it flowered. Like the foliage just looks so great in the garden. And in fact, I added two more last fall, so those two are, they're giving me a teeny bit of growth this year, but by next year they'll really be a standout. So yeah, so I'm pretty happy where everything's at.
And your iris, the variegated iris, is it that light purple, light to medium purple one?
Yeah, it's more like a periwinkle,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I wish it was the deep one. I love that, but that color, but it's more of a, and the foliage is kind of more creamy. I think they call it yellow or gold. I looked it up. Palisades, yeah. So,
I
uh,
whenever I think of that iris, I forget the cultivar or the variety, but whenever I smell it, it smells like a freshly opened package of grape Kool-Aid powder.
oh, I never even thought to smell it. Should I go smell?
Yeah, you should go smell it and see if it's that one. It's like I
I'll be
can't
right
believe
back.
it.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'll
I'll
wait till
just hold down
after
the
the
fort.
show. You hold down the fort while I run out. So
Yeah,
that's the cool thing about we're both at home, right? Everybody, we're as all our listeners are at home, we are too.
you got it. And we're thankful that you are all able to join us here, wherever you are in the world,
We
and
are.
tune in.
How are
Um,
things at the garden center?
oh yes, let's talk. Yes, you know what? Things are going very well. Uh, Sales are incredible despite all of the craziness that's happening. People are still out. There's so many new gardeners, and just I think we were talking before just the supply chains. Um, there's so many food and medical contracts, and things are being delayed. So there's still stuff coming in, but I mean, people are just buying up absolutely everything. There's so many excited new gardeners. They're home doing their thing. They're planting that tree or venturing out into the world of gardening where they didn't have the time to before. So it's really exciting to see and be around. They've all got a really good energy, but there's still lots of cool stuff to be had. And like you said, they're the summer snowflake viburnum, one of my favorites as well. They're looking gorgeous in the garden center. There's so many fabulous things. It's been a great week. That's all I can say.
Oh, that's good. How and the weekend? So you work the weekend as well?
Yeah, and you know what we were finding actually surprisingly is the weeks are busier than the weekends. The
Because I
weekends
think
are
people
slow.
are assuming that it's going to be busy, so they're getting out on the weekdays since they're home, right?
Yes, I think so too. Yeah, that they're just kind of venturing out during the week. So yeah, and it's great. Yeah, I don't know what else I could say. It's great. There's lots of stuff to be had. So make the venture out. There's still lots of great stuff still arriving at your garden centers,
Right.
uh,
And
and
now is
still
stuff
lots
still
of time
coming
to
in?
plant.
Yeah, because I know there's I've gotten some emails where people are asking me to find them the plants because the garden centers don't have everything. Like, and I know the trucks, have been
Yeah,
slower to come from the US and slower, to come from BC, that type of thing, but they're coming, right?
they are coming. They are coming. The one thing that's really not going to end up coming is more of the annuals. Uh,
Okay.
they're
They're done.
they're pretty much done. The veggies and the annuals, for the most part, are done. Most of the growers have gotten rid of their smaller stuff. They're moving, and you're going to find into the either the really big hanging baskets that have been grown on for a while, or like the 6-inch or 10-inch material where it's that time of the year where something in the annual bed has died, and you need something big just to kind of shove it in there and replace
Hmm.
it. I do that.
Same with the vegetables, right? I mean, we're past the point of needing cell packs, and so now the garden centers are going to have things more in 6-inch and 10-inch pots, which is good. Yes, they're a little bit pricier. You're not going
Yes.
to get your $3 cell pack, but it's now more advanced in the garden, right? And you're not going to miss it. You're not going to be behind.
Yeah, you exactly. You'll find that 10-inch or 12-inch patio tomato already grown with some tomatoes possibly even starting on it. And then yeah, the littler things that you wanted to plant out, even some of the herbs, some of the more exotic, smaller 4-inch herbs, depending on how they get growing again, because they started closing right as the COVID thing hit. Um, they're going to start to, it's normally that time where most of that will start to become sparse too. The staples like your lavender, your rosemary, your basil, one parsley kind of thing, that'll all should be still around, but the curries and the hot peppers and the bizarre, columnar pesto basils and other outside of the box kind of herbs are going to start to go away.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then I know we're having trouble getting some of the outside ones in anymore. Yeah, so part of it's just small, and some of them were just didn't get done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. But peppers and tomato plants, they're just going to be available, but they're going to be available more in 6-inch pots. or 10-inch pots?
Yeah, they're gonna, like you said, they're gonna just start become available in bigger sizes when where possible.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And how about your vegetable garden on your balcony?
It is growing. I've got my early girl. She's exploding skyward. Hopefully, she will start to bear in a little while. There's still a couple weeks going. The garlic, I'm going to have to go back and listen to our show on garlic because I know it's getting close. It's mid June. It's my first year growing it. They're big, they're beautiful. The scapes are massive.
Oh,
Uh,
are you already getting the scapes? Are they starting to curl?
they're just kind of starting to appear.
Okay.
Yeah, or
Okay.
sorry, I'm as I say the escapes, the all the foliage, they're
Hmm.
all layered. They're getting just big, big, big. So I have to review being my first time growing garlic when the timing is to knock it down, or I think I'm the onions, but the timing for getting it all up and doing all that stuff. But
Yeah.
it's coming along quite nicely. The strawberries are filled with flowers and fruit are developing, so that's exciting too. Yeah.
Oh,
So the
that's good.
balcony's
Yeah,
looking
I think
good.
we've got some more time for garlic. I think it's more mid-July. I think that you're going to start to see the scapes come up and start to curl.
Yeah.
And if you harvest them before they get too, right away kind of thing, then you can kind of fry those up with butter and they taste quite good.
See, I'll have to try that. I've never done
Yeah,
that before. So
yeah, for sure. But if you leave them on too long, then they get kind of tough. So you kind of it's like a timing thing.
yeah.
And yeah, and then I think it's a couple weeks after that. So yeah, we'll have to talk and both do it at the same time because I have them growing in two different places in my front yard as well as my backyard. So yeah, the backyard especially is doing really well.
Nice. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So
Very cool.
so
Well,
we are in the second week of June.
that's right. And if you're just joining and you don't know, with every new month comes a new topic here this year on Down the Garden Path. And this month we are talking all about perennials. So from caring for your perennials and the new perennials for 2020 to peonies and ornamental grasses, this month we'll have you growing back for more. And tonight we're going to continue our month-long discussion about perennials with a trip into the wonderful world of peonies. So,
Hmm.
if you have a peony, or perhaps you have a question about peonies or perennials, or you want to share an experience, we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget, you can write us here in studio at instudio101 at gmail.com. Um,
And June is typically peony month, right?
that's right. Yes, it is June, typically peony month. They're all starting to come out. They're starting to swell and get their buds. And it's all the peony festivals as well. We've got all of our local peony uh, societies and festivals and groups all getting ready and gearing up for the peony festivals. Normally, from what I understand, depending on where you are, you may or may not have a virtual tour of your peony gardens. Not quite sure how that's going to work. I'm here in the Oshawa area, so I know we have the Oshawa Valley Gardens, which you can find on peony.ca. You can find a list of some of the peony gardens around your area in Canada. I believe they have some links as well to some of the U.S. sites as well for our U.S. listeners. Um, and you may have had some peonies already come and go depending on
Hmm.
where you are. But
Hmm.
yeah, you can definitely tune in, search your local city or your local municipality to see if they have their virtual peony tour for, especially if you've had one there in the past. But I know Oshawa hasn't. I mean, they've given the link to the website if you just kind of Google it, but there's no details on what or when yet it's going to be or what it's going to look like. So it's something new. I think they're going to all try out for, and hopefully you'll get the good dose of all those fabulous peonies. You wanted Joanne to give a shout out.
Yes, to Whistling Gardens. I know we've had them on the show. I believe we had Darren on the show last year. So Whistling Gardens is actually the home of an amazing peony collection, 1,300 plus varieties of peonies, and it looks like they are open. In fact, I noticed a tweet here from June 7th, which was yesterday. It says Peony Collection Update, June 7th. 50% of them are in bloom. And did you know? And so most of the collection was donated by David Maltby and his family, and that they visited yesterday. And so he's saying that they're
Oh,
open from Wednesday through Sunday, 9:30 to 5. So if you are in Ontario and in the GTA, it is worth the drive to Whistling Gardens to take a look at. I mean, they've got an amazing conifer collection. They've got a little nursery with some amazing conifers to buy, but they also have this amazing peony collection. So it is definitely a shout out to Whistling Gardens. Um, so take a look. Yeah,
yeah. And I saw someone posted to one of the groups I'm in, and they posted like 30 plus pictures of their little trip to Whistling Gardening to see the peonies, and they're absolutely stunning. Um, there's all sorts of colors and types, and it looks fabulous. So definitely check them out. You're right. Yeah,
excellent. And
those
yeah,
are
and
great.
Darren was saying that just because they're 22 acres, I mean, they're massive, it is a massive space, that they're comfortable. They said their priority is everybody's safety and comfort, and definitely plenty of space to ensure physical distancing. So that's great news.
That's excellent news because
Hmm.
yeah, it's the weather's been gorgeous lately. So fantastic.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think it's peonies on the surface can seem like, oh, okay, what are we going to talk about peonies? And most people are familiar with the common, peony. But there are different varieties, aren't there? And some that are really becoming really well known. And so, yeah. So I'm really excited that we get to do a deep dive.
That is right. We have two listener questions.
Oh, already?
Um,
Excellent.
they're perennial related. Should we
Okay.
jump into those before we jump into peonies?
Absolutely.
All right. We're bringing them up here. So Brian writes, "Hello, Joanne and Matthew. Love the show. My question to you this evening is this: what type of soil is the best type to grow rhododendrons? Should I add anything to my sandy soil? I live in Dayton, Ohio, Zone 6A. Thanks." Thank you for listening and tuning in. And thanks, Brian, for letting us know where you are. We love to know where everybody is. It's fun to know where our listeners are. But rhododendrons, yeah, they tend to be more like a woodland shade type creature. So they do like a little bit more of a well drained, somewhat loamy or composty soil. So you could add some good organic matter or quality compost to it. The sand is good, that'll add some drainage. And then the other key is that it wants to be acidic. The rhododendrons like acidic soil, so closer to that 5.2, 5.7, low sixes type range. So just making sure that it's acidic, that it's got some good organic matter, and she drains well. That should enhance your soil or your space for rhododendron. And if you've got it really, really sandy, you may have to add. It may take a little bit of work just around where you'd like your rhododendrons to be in that shade to partial shade area, just to kind of catch and take with all that with the compost in that such a loamy soil or sandy soil. Sorry.
Right. Okay.
So hopefully that answers your question. And if it doesn't, write us back.
That's right.
Claudette asks, "Hi, are there any perennials that bloom in both the spring and the fall? I'm not sure. Thanks."
Well, there's some that bloom all summer, aren't there?
Yeah, and that's what jumped
All
to
like
my
all,
mind.
yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder if Claudette, if you were thinking kind of like almost like the bloomerang lilac, where she comes out in spring and she's a big flush, then she goes green, and then she stops for a bit, and then she comes out again late August, early September, and like that kind of blooming. None of them jump to my mind. Not sure what zone you are in. If you're in a warmer zone, there might be something like that. But here, yeah, like Joanne was saying, it's more like your echinaceas, your rhodos, your geraniums,
Well,
things that
rhodos,
tend to.
yeah,
Sorry, rhodos. I'm
yeah,
thinking about
yeah.
Brian, um, not rhodos. Early
No,
spring
well,
blooming, Brian.
rose like some of the stuff, my favorite perennials that we talked about last week, like
Yeah,
this year it's been because it's the cooler spring. Things like Roseanne geranium normally for me blooms in May. It hasn't started blooming. It looks like it's just about to. Catmint is also Nepeta. Catmint is another one that my catmint has been blooming since May and will bloom right until the fall. So it just won't stop. And Roseanne geranium is a perennial geranium, and it will start blooming anytime now, and will also continue. Like, I have got pictures of it when we get our first snow. Remember last year we got our first snowfall just after, I think, the first week of November, and my perennial geranium was still covered in purple flowers. So
Yeah.
there are a few things. Those are the two that I feel like are the easiest because they don't really require any deadheading or anything like that. Whereas, salvia, some of the others will repeat bloom after you've headed them. Um, I think the echinaceas, because they don't really start blooming until midsummer. I find, like, yes, they go late, but they certainly don't start blooming. They need some heat.
That
So
is,
so
that's
yeah.
tricky.
So our listener, sorry, I didn't catch our listener's name.
I've moved away. I believe it is Claudette.
Claudette. So if that helps, those are two of my favorite. And there are sometimes the catmint are can be very large, but the new variety that I've been using a lot is called Persian something, but it's spelled like a cat, Purr, Purr. And because even Walker's Low is not that low, so I've kind of moved on to. So I have one Walker's Low in my garden, but then the rest are the Persian, and it's much lower. And if you want something bigger, then you can definitely go with the Walker's Low. But and it's also probably the top pollinator in my garden. So the bees and the butterflies, that's the thing that they go to.
Yeah, they love the
Hmm.
catmint, don't they?
Yeah. So I hope that helps.
Yes. And as we start our peony discussion, Emma has written in what other perennials complement being grown with peonies? And Emma, I would wonder, are you thinking more when they're not in bloom, when you've got just the nice clumps of foliage that are left behind by the peonies, their texture and the shapes of the leaves of the peonies? Or do you want something more like when they're blooming with the peonies to bloom with the peonies to complement the peony
Mm,
flowers?
that's tricky.
Yes, that's a tricky question. And then it's just tricky in the way, like we're going to talk about in a second, just all the different types of peonies and the sizes and the colors and
Hmm.
the et cetera, et cetera. So maybe Emma, if you wanted to write back, do you want it blooming with the peonies or just kind of beside the peonies?
So that it takes over when the peonies are done.
Right. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
That's
And
right.
I think at the same time, it's not really a perennial, it's more of a bulb. But the only thing I can think of would be alliums. Although it's still tricky because I think a lot of that is so weather related. Like, my peonies aren't out blooming yet, and my alliums are almost done. But my peonies are just about to bloom. So it's like but some seasons that might be a success, and some seasons it's harder. So very tricky question, Emily.
That is Emma. Yeah, that is a
Emma.
very tricky question because even the peonies themselves, weather dependent, right? If it's cooler or if it's warmer,
Mm,
depending on what kind of season we have, just like anything else, they might delay, they might go quicker, et cetera, et
mhm.
cetera. So yeah, that's a really good question, Emma.
Yeah.
Um,
And heaven forbid it rain. That's everybody's saddest part, right? Oh,
oh yes.
I know. Uh,
So let's dive into peonies.
okay, let's dive in.
So, a little bit of background about some peonies, some etymology about peonies. I know. um, so, the tree and the herbaceous peonies, for the most part, are native to eastern China, and a lot of herbaceous ones can be found around Mediterranean Europe. They've come to have two names depending uh, ancient China and ancient Greece. The ancient Chinese called the peonies the king of flowers, and the ancient Greeks, for its medicinal purpose, called peonies the queen of all herbs because the roots are antispasmodic properties. So seizures and spasms and nerve disorders. That's what that the herb of the peony root is used, or the peony root's used as a herb that way.
Okay.
So just a little bit of background information I've always found interesting, but yeah, anyways. So like we were saying before, they're all different types of peonies, and there's three major types, and there's garden peonies. Oops, sorry. So there's garden peonies,
Which is the
um,
typical one, right?
right, which is the typical local one. They're also called the herbaceous peonies. They come up. They're so big, 2 to 5 feet tall, somewhat wide, depending on the the cultivar or the variety, and they are all going to die back to the ground every year
In the winter,
in
yes.
the winter, right? Or they'll go dormant and they'll die to the ground. Um, I don't. Yeah, yeah, they're going to die to the ground. Sorry, I was looking at something else. They're going to bloom. Sorry, I'm totally going off topic here. They're going to bloom late spring through early summer, but like we were just talking about, that can be weather dependent as well. And then there also, if you can take a really close look at the group of all the peonies, because we're going to talk about two other types in a second as well. There's some very early cultivars that will bloom right at the beginning of the late spring. And there are some that will delay themselves a little bit by themselves. And there come out later, mid-season, or begin closer to the early summer type of time. So just kind of like they were saying at Whistling Gardens, right? 50% of them are out. There's a large number of them out, but there are still a number that will slowly come along. There are still ones that will pop out a little later. Don't just start kind of right away type of thing.
Right, right.
So another type that we often see is the tree peonies. So these are actually large shrubs. We give them the name tree, but technically they are morphology. They are more of a shrub type. They do bloom a little better with winter protection because the buds are susceptible to an early frost, and they can get fairly large. Again, they're a larger shrub, and they can get anywhere from 4 by 4, and I think I've seen some listed cultivars closer to 8 by 6 and 8 by 4. So there are some larger ones there as well.
Okay.
And then, of course, you may have seen the Itoh peony.
Which
Um,
is new, right? So most people, I don't know if they know about the Itoa peony.
yes. And so if you haven't heard of it and you don't know, it's Itoh.
Unless they've seen them at the garden center and noticed the price and thinking, what in the world? That
Yeah,
can't be priced like that, right? Because they are quadruple the price of a regular peony.
they are expensive. Yes,
Yes.
yes. So these Itoas, or technically the intersectional hybrids, but no one's going to call them that, or the peony fanatics will. So I apologize for those who are listening. Um, they're a cross between your garden types and your tree types. And like the garden types, they're going to die back to the ground every winter. They're going to be herbaceous. They're going to lose all of their above ground foliage. But they do have the same flowers, the same types and structures as the tree peonies. So they're going to look more like tree peonies, but they're going to act more like garden peonies as far as whether they die or not back to the ground. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what makes them so expensive? What do you think?
I think it's the hybridization and the timing and the patents that go into creating the larger, that just the showiness and that larger plant. I
Hmm.
think that's what it is.
And they tend to be, I think of many of the herbaceous peonies tend to be, I'm going to say almost carnation like in the sense that it's a full head, like a full flower, right? Very many layers to it, with some exceptions for sure.
Yeah,
And aren't the Itoa ones a little bit more open, a little bit more almost like poppy like, where they're, you can kind of see the inside of the flower. What's that called again? The stamen. Am I going to say stamens?
yeah, yep. The
Yeah,
pistils and the stamens.
pistils and stamens. Yes. Is that? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, yeah. Most of them tend to be like a semi double or a double. There's the different classifications of all the types of those flowers.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, oops, sorry. Yeah. So they tend to be more like double, semi double, um, more like that. Sometimes they could be Japanese or an enemy, like in their style, but they do tend to be a bit bigger. Not that there isn't some singles, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely, even when if I Google the picture, so if anybody's at their computer, which most people listening are, you can
Yep.
Google the Itoa peony and you can see the difference. See how you can see inside and see the stamens and pistils a little bit more. They also tend to be a little bit stronger, right? I mean, our herbaceous ones, created the whole, support, like peony supports, right? The peony, um, um, oh my
Yeah, the
gosh,
peony rings
hoops, peony
and hoops.
rings,
Yeah.
the different things that to support the peonies. But the Itoa ones, do they not? Aren't they a little bit stronger?
Yeah, they gain a little bit more strength in the stem from the tree peony side of their lineage. Right.
Right.
So they're not as often needed as heavy staking for them. You may get them depending on the type you have and the size of the flower, double or versus more of a single or a semi double. You may need to, or if you've got a windy spot or you get a lot of rain, you may need some added support that way. But overall, they do tend to have more of a body to them that they don't require as much staking as the herbaceous peonies with all that
Okay.
soft new growth. Yeah.
Excellent. And what's an advantage of the tree peony?
It's define like what are you kind of thinking of as like
Well,
an
why would
advantage?
somebody buy a tree peony instead of the herbaceous one?
Well, it leaves it like unlike the Itoh or the garden one, it's going to leave wood behind. So you're going to actually have a spot like a shrub in the garden. So you're going to have
Okay.
that presence basically. And then of course the tree peonies have those larger, bigger, gorgeous, unique flowers as well. So you're not going to cut back your tree peony like you are going to be do any like removing of your itoa or your garden. So it's a little bit less
Okay.
maintenance. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't often cut back my peony, I have to say. I mean, I think the foliage, for me, the foliage of peonies, I know that bloom can be short lived, but the foliage is actually quite nice. I mean, it's nice and green and leathery.
Yeah, and I sorry, as I think about cutting back, I'm thinking more like winter care or preparation.
Okay.
And we go to the fact that we like to leave everything anyways. So yeah, the only real reason I would probably remove any foliage, especially in a growing season, would be like if they had something like their powdery mildew or
Mm,
some other disease that you
right.
didn't want to spread really in your garden.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say color palette is also, I mean, aren't there more yellows and kind of more different colors, salmons and things like that available in the tree peony and the Itoa than there are with the herbaceous?
There can be, yeah, and it depends on which like strain you go. If you go to different like the Lucia hybrids or the Japanese hybrids
Okay. Okay.
and things like that. So yeah, they
Yeah.
do have depending on which one you have, different colors. Yeah, color palettes
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, because I think everybody is familiar with the good old standby pink or deep pink or light pink peony, but they really do come in quite a range of colors, as well as open, a little bit more open flowers. So I actually have, it's long gone, but I have a fern leaf peony
yes,
that has a really unique leaf and very open, delicate flower, very much like a poppy in the sense that the petals are very fragile and you really see the yellow center to it. So yeah, so that was a early bloomer for me in May.
very nice. Yeah, definitely take a look if you haven't seen the fern leaf peony. They tend to be fairly expensive as well in the
Hmm.
garden center just for breeding and the uniqueness of that smaller peony. And then just like you were saying with color palettes too, definitely dive into the peonies if you like peonies. Take contact some of the peony societies in your area because a lot of the garden centers, unless they really someone like Whistling Gardens, because I think they sell some of the peonies or
Mm.
as well. They tend to be like there's a labeled pink, a labeled white, a labeled red, a labeled bicolor, and then you usually get like that limited palette, right? You don't
Right.
have any of the two tones or the anemone style with the where the stamens and the pistons are just been basically replaced with like very feathery petally types. So there's a lot of unique different forms and types and a lot of different colors that are out there as well,
Yeah, definitely.
for
And I think
sure.
mail order, I think it's definitely something, you don't get quite a bit of blooms the first couple of years. Like it takes a while to get established. But I think sometimes you can, via mail order, find some roots or some plants that are more unique. You just need a little bit of patience, but they definitely will be, a conversation piece in your garden. So if your garden is kind of complete and you just want to tweak it with a few things, I think adding like Itoa or Japanese tree peony is a great way to kind of add something that most people aren't going to have, and that are really going to be a really cool showstopper. So yeah,
That's
so
right.
I'm excited that we get to share with people more about it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Speaking of people sharing, we have Gwen has written in a question, and Gwen says, "This is a really weird question." She thinks in brackets. Someone told me that she needs ants to get her peonies to bloom. Is that true or just hogwash? I've never heard of such a thing. Thanks.
Very common, Matt. That's a common question. What do you say? What's the verdict?
The verdict is false. The
Hmm.
buds are tight, and the peonies will naturally secrete some honeydew or some sap as the peonies are there and the are nice and tight and the scales are there. But it does not require it to open. But the ants are smart. They can detect that there is some sugars nearby, and as they explore and mark ways to foods, they'll definitely take advantage of all the sugar rich secretions from the peony buds. So they will do no harm. They will go up, they're going to sop up and collect some of that sugary goodness, and they're going to return it to the queen and the colony, etc. But they're going to do no harm. They are not required. They're just happily taking advantage of something free from the peony.
Excellent. Yeah. So I mean, people honestly swear by that they're ants that need, and it's true. The ants know that there's something to eat there, and so yes, they do attract ants, but but I don't think that takes away. I mean, I think you still can, you can give them a good shake before if you want to cut them and bring them in the house. You can give them a good shake and still bring them in the house. I know there's some people that don't grow peonies. I've heard say, "Oh no, they attract ants. I don't want to have them in my garden." So that's a shame because I think everybody should have a peony. And I'm the one who says, I don't put perennials in unless they last most of the summer. And I always say to people, with the exception of a peony, because even though it's short lived, it
They're
is
just so stunning.
always great to see that in the garden. So yeah, and I know there's a lot of I know we had Country Flower Farms on and Dahlia Mayflower Farm in Prince Edward County. So there are a lot of local growers that are growing peonies, and and man, it's an investment. Like they plant these things and these plants, and it takes them 5 years before they can actually harvest their peonies. So they need to mature in the fields, and so it's quite an investment that it goes into flower farming. But I think it's cool that it's a flower that we can grow locally. I'm sure wherever you are in the U.S. I don't know how it grows in the really hot areas of the U.S., but it is something that you can find local growers, right?
That's right. That's right. I think most peonies prefer closer to the zone 9 range for the heat,
Mm,
and then
okay.
too much warmer and they start to get a little upset. But
Okay, but that's still a
yeah,
pretty good
that's still a
range.
great range.
Yeah, 4 to 9 is
Lots.
a pretty good. Well, probably even 3 to 9 is probably a pretty good range, right? Threes are probably growing. They're not blooming until probably later in the June. But
Right.
yeah, I think peonies are pretty tough. And I also, like I said before, I love the foliage. I think if I'm bringing cut flowers in later in the season after my peonies are done, I'll often trim leaves of the peony because I think they're nice and leathery and they're nicer, to kind of stick in the vase and as a filler. So I quite like my peony leaves.
Right. Yes, I love the leaves, the shapes as well.
So in addition to ants, there's often other concerns that people have with peonies. I can think of two: one, powdery mildew, and two, not blooming.
That's right. Those are
So yeah, those are the
definitely
two
two of
biggest
the biggest
complaints.
ones.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about the powdery mildew?
Yeah. So powdery mildew, they're kind of everywhere. It's that white grayish mold or fuzz that you see grow on it on your peony leaves or any leaves because it does attack and affect a number of different perennials, trees, and shrubs. But basically, sanitation as well as proper watering and air circulation really come down to it. So if you're out there watering, never water your peonies leaves. If there's spores there, they will take advantage of some free moisture if it doesn't dry quick enough, and you will get powdery mildew, and the powdery mildew loves peonies. It will spread like you've just lit your peony on fire. It'll be cover it within one season. So just make sure you're not watering it. Letting the rain, I know, well, the rain waters it. Yes, the rain waters it, and that could cause it as well. You can cut out those leaves, but then also just making sure it's got a good amount of sun. Peonies prefer the full sun. and also just making sure that you've got proper sanitation. So that includes, removing any of the dead foliage from the previous year, making sure that other plants nearby don't have or have the proper sanitation. They also don't have powdery mildew that could spread in that way as well. And then again, air circulation. Fungal diseases like powdery mildew hate air circulation. They need that little bit of humidity. And you can see even in the hot, humid summers, we'll get powdery mildew no matter what. You don't water your leaves and powdery mildew appears. It's that humid. There's
Mm,
that much free moisture, even in the evenings, for it to do it. So just air circulation, cleaning up your garden, making sure there is no powdery mildew nearby. And if you really need to, you can cut out some of those larger, rattier, powdery mildew infested leaves. And I've seen where some peonies will actually send up some new, brand new leaves underneath those as they become too white, and you can kind of remove them and reveal some of the fresher foliage underneath.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
not blooming. There are
Hmm.
a lot of reasons your peonies may not be blooming. Um, Tons and tons and tons. One of them, just and you've kind of alluded to already, like the flower farms, they're too young. They might be too young. They may have been moved or divided too often. So they just need more time to develop. They need time to settle in. They need to grow their roots. They need to be fully established before they're ready to be done or to start blooming. Over fertilized and under fertilized. So you can undernourish your plants. The buds form, but they won't really develop. So they just kind of sit there, right? They won't really flourish. Peonies do like a little bit of a richer soil. They don't really flourish if it's too poor, or they don't like to do too much if there's too much competition between all the other plants. So they don't like to be tight right in root ball to root ball with somebody else. So give them a little space, and you can just top dress them with some compost, and that will really bring up the quality of the soil and get them going. Over fertilize, if you're over fertilizing with too much high nitrogen, right, that first number in your three fertilizer numbers, you
Okay.
can cause them just to be green. She'll just have excess nitrogen. She'll cut down on flower production, and she'll just be happy. She'll be green, and she'll just kind of hang out. She might give you one or two flowers, but they tend to not form too many buds when they're green. You're giving me a look.
No, no, I hit something on my computer and I could hear the noise. I wasn't sure if you could hear it, so I
Oh, I
apologize,
couldn't.
everybody.
Oh, okay.
That was the look. Oh,
um,
a multitasking look. Hmm.
there you go. So,
So,
like we said, oh, go ahead.
oh well, I was going to say the other kind of cool thing, and I'd love to hear from some listeners where this has happened. But often, I've been a landscape designer a long time, and I would say that peonies are probably also the most sentimental, that
Very
many
sentimental.
people that have peonies have some of their grandmother's peonies or their mother's peonies or their mother-in-law's peonies that when the house was sold, that was the one thing that they took, that type of thing. So they tend to be very sentimental and very long, which kind of shows how long lived they are. um,
Well,
and
and
you know
they can live upwards of 120 years. So keep
hmm
handing them down.
hmm Definitely. So I often get asked, can I divide them? Can I give half to my daughter? Or I've just taken them from my mother's house before we sold it, and now this year I've got them and they're not blooming. So that often, so as much as they can live a long time, in my experience, they don't love being moved. They'll put up with it, and they
Right.
may take a year or two to recover, but it really isn't. It depends on timing. Right now is not the time to divide, move a
No,
peony.
it is the fall.
It is the fall, definitely. And I think that we should explain to our listeners to really look at go outside right now, if you or after the show, and look at your peony bush and how you can see, would you call it the roots? Not really seeing the roots, but you can see the tops of the tubers.
The
So it's,
crowns.
yeah, the crowns. Thank you. So it's really important that we don't plant them too deep. So whether you're buying a new one, I know sometimes people buy that pot and sink it in a hole that's too big and fill it up with good soil and think they're good, but really they need to plant them at the same depth as they're purchasing them.
Right.
And that goes for the ones that you're dividing or maybe digging up from someone else. You really need to make sure that that crown at the base of the plant is still exposed. And I know it seems weird because everything else we cover up, right? We dig deep and cover up.
That's right. Yes, you want those crown exposed, much like your irises, right? They like that little bit of the top of that tuber to sunbathe. They develop nicely when just the top tip is kind of showing. A lot of questions I get in the garden center too about the fall and the transplanting is, well, if I'm buying it now, should I keep it in the pot until the fall to transplant it or move it? And the answer is no. You want to put it in as soon as you can.
Hmm.
And then just like you were saying, yeah, moved and dividing too often. The other part is the proper division. You want to make sure that when you do divide, you're getting at least 3 to 5 eyes. So the little, if you think about your hosta, the little spikes that come out, you want at least 3 to 5 good growing points on your division and then replant it. If it's divided too small, she's going to start to struggle. Or if it's divided
Mm.
too often, like you take a piece and
Hmm.
then take another piece, that will also slow them down as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of cool that it is something, and I over the years I've heard that a ton, just about everybody's prize peony.
Yes.
And
Yes.
even actually today we're doing an install in my neighborhood, and the homeowner said, so we put in some plants, and it's a new garden, it's a small garden, and I explained, the plants arrived and we haven't put them in yet, and I explained how there's going to be space in between right now until like that I've designed the garden so that the plants have room to grow in. And she said, any chance we can fit in a peony? And I'm like, absolutely. And she said, because I was just at my mother-in-law's and she had this gorgeous, unique yellow and pink peony. And she said that I could have some. And, where would I put it? And so I thought that, it's just another example of, it's just one of those plants that really stands the test of time and is really sentimental to people.
Agree completely. Yep. I wish I had some of my mom's old peonies from when
Yes, yes.
I
Did
was a
your
kid.
Nana have any? Because I know your Nana's garden was very shade, right?
Yeah, she loved them, but it was very shade. We couldn't
Yeah,
grow them.
you couldn't grow them. We couldn't grow them, and that's I don't know if we cover. You think I wasn't part of the call, but sometimes people think that because they bloom before the leaves are on the tree, that oh, it's okay, I can plant them in this spot, but really, right, early spring they buy them and they put them in this quote unquote sunny spot, but
Right.
once the tree leaves out or the tree matures over time, then that is another reason why your peony might not be blooming.
That's
Correct.
right. Right, because it's too little sun. Yeah, where the you plant it where the shade has, or the leaves haven't leafed out yet. That's
Mm-hmm.
the deciduous sun. That's a trick. It's a trick.
Trick.
That's not full sun. Yeah,
Right. It's tricky, tricky.
that's right. Speaking of
Many are
situ,
fooled. Many are fooled. But oh, do we have a
yes,
question?
we do. We have a few questions.
Oh, good.
Emma has written back. She has
Oh,
said
good.
she has both situations. So,
Ah,
what are some suggestions for during their blooming and after their blooming? And that's going to be a big question, I think.
hmm.
So, I thought maybe that
Emma, that might be the whole show.
that's what I was thinking. So, I thought maybe we could write Emma after the show and we could send her some suggestions.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we're going to get you a list, Emma. We'll send you some, pardon me, some suggestions to plant with your peonies, both during bloom and after, to complement that beautiful, lovely plant. So hang tight. We'll get you some answers. We have Holly is written in. Holly says, "Hello, radio show. This is my first time. I am listening from Lincoln, Nebraska. My question: how deep should I plant my peonies? Love your advice. Thanks." And so, Holly, I think we got to the answer to that question before we got your question. But right, you want to plant it just if you buy one level with the ground. You want that growing crown to be just at the ground level. We don't want to bury it too deep, or we can cause issues like not blooming. It can also cause the plant to die if crowns are buried too deep. So just level with the pot. Always look where the leaves turn into the crown, the top, very top part of that root, and just nice and level. And you never really have to dig it deeper than the pot. If you bought a pot that's 8 inches deep, you only have to go down 8 inches deep, make it level, and you're good to go. Yeah,
Excellent. Yeah. Yep, definitely. Or if you again borrowed, taken some from someone else,
right.
that is definitely keep it at that same soil level where you see they had it planted.
Exactly. So hopefully that answers your question. And thank you for tuning in, the first time
Yes,
listener.
welcome. And thank you for
Welcome to
telling
the
us where
show.
you are. We love it when listeners tell us where they are.
We do. We have another question, two more to go. John writes in, "Hi, I have to move my peonies. How and when to do it properly?" And I think that arrived right in the middle of while we were talking about it. So hopefully, John, we did answer your question. Movement fall, bigger divisions, 3 to 5 eyes, just as deep as you had it before. Um, Hopefully that we answered your questions. And if not, write us in and let us know, and we're happy to go over
Hmm.
it or be more specific if you need as well.
Hmm.
Lastly, as we enter the last 10 minutes of Down the Garden Path here on
I
Reality Radio
know. Oh my
101,
gosh.
Ken writes in, "Hi, just wanted to say you saved, all in caps, saved my peonies with your fantastic advice tonight. Thank you."
Oh,
And
you're welcome.
you're very welcome, Ken. Thank you for tuning in and joining us here. We're glad that our advice has helped you in your garden with your
Hmm.
peonies. So,
Now, if we go back to John for a second, sometimes
mm-hmm,
you can't wait until fall. Like fall is
correct.
the best time. But let's say, John, you're having some landscaping done, or you're having a new entrance put in, or
Or
something
you're
like that, and
moving.
or you're moving, you want to take them with you. Absolutely. Now when they're in bloom and in bud, not ideal for sure. But if you can wait at least until after they're blooming, um, I think keeping taking as much of the soil, like really taking a big amount. Don't you think, Matt? Like try to
Always.
take as much as possible and put it in a big container, that type of thing. So I think you really want to treat it almost like it's a shrub. Really try to take as much so that you're not shocking the roots. Like it's not the type of plant that you want to, like a hosta where you can kind of hack at it
Oh, yeah.
and and then the one little bit that you left will come back and be fine, right? They are a little bit more fragile, especially in the growing season. So I think it's still doable. I know we've had to do it and we've had to move
Mm,
them for landscaping reasons and other reasons, and people moving or my house is selling. There's lots of reasons.
yeah, there
So
is
it's
lots
not
of
like it's
reasons.
impossible. So I just think you really want to take more than you think more than anything else, right?
Yeah,
Don't you
I
agree?
agreed. I always suggest take as big of a root ball as you can manage. You
Hmm.
don't want to take away any of the soil. There's the fibrous, really fine roots. They're the main feeders. You want to take as many of them as you can. And then just if you have to have it in that container, you can't plant it right away. Keep it evenly moist. Don't drown it. And then keep it in a bright, indirect light just to reduce some of that the shock from it. Give it like don't let it sit out in the sun all day anymore. It doesn't have that garden worth of resources. So just kind of keep the stress, mitigating that stress. Again, just in a bright, bright, indirect light. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that's great. So, I mean, I hope our listeners kind of investigate the Japanese tree peony as
Yeah.
well as the Itoh peony. Take a look at some of the virtual tours during this pandemic where you might not be able to see them in person, but you can definitely see them virtually. And the GTA, I know the Oshawa Peony Festival happens every June in Oshawa. It's a beautiful garden. Again, the timing is always dependent on the weather. It's usually always in June.
Yes.
Whistling, if the more the west, kind of the northwest end, you can find Whistling Gardens. Also puts on an amazing display of an amazing collection of peonies. So yeah, so I know there's a peony festival somewhere near you, wherever you are.
That's it. So take a look around and enjoy those beautiful blooms while they last.
And also, if you're buying some at the garden center, or not the garden center, at the flowers florists. Oh my gosh, flower shops. Definitely, seek out locally grown flowers versus imported ones, and I think that's a great thing that most peonies are grown in so many different zones that there is somebody growing them locally. A small, grower, a small farmer a flower farmer is near you. Dahlia May in Prince Edward County, and Country Garden Farms in Newmarket. So those are some options that I know of off the top of my head locally. So that's a great way. You get a beautiful bouquet of flowers and support local growers.
Yeah, that's right. Especially the local grower. I've read some blogs before on peonies, and they were saying it can be that zone 3 on the north end of their range. Some of the times they'll plant those peonies, and they're not acclimatized to the winters in the further north, those weather. So it's really good to get locally sourced material that have adapted already in
Hmm.
some extremes. So yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, definitely. So
Well, should we wrap up our discussion on
we can. What are we talking about
peonies?
next? So as we love this topic. We're both of us were really excited to talk about perennials. And so after peonies, what are we talking about next week?
Next week on June 15th, we are going to talk about ground covers and specifically ground covers as mulch, taking our ground covers to the next level, if you will.
Oh.
Right. So we're going to explore the world of some of the cool and unique different ground covers and how to use them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big one, right? Because there are a lot that are even native ground covers. There are some that we're going to definitely recommend that you don't buy that are aggressive and invasive ground covers. So, which I wish garden centers wouldn't sell.
I
And
agree.
neighbors, if again, it kind of goes to my ground covers can be one of those things where oh, my neighbor had lots of it, so they gave me some of theirs. And that's always a big buyer beware thing because if someone is giving you something that they have too much of, then very shortly you will also have too much of it. So yes, definitely a challenge. So
That's
an
right.
exciting topic. I have a lot of a variety of ground covers in my garden, and I've started to kind of establish them as a mulch, especially close to the curb, so that they can kind of retain my slope a little bit. And I have a narrow garden in my backyard underneath a privacy screen where I can't, I can't put a ton of stuff. And I also don't want anything that's overhanging the garden area so that we're
Mm.
tripping and bumping into them. So I'm actually going to plant a whole bunch of sedums and kind of create a sedum garden. So I'm excited to talk about those next week.
Ooh,
Hmm.
very cool.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Well, that brings us to the end of another week here on Down the Garden Path. Don't forget, you can follow us on Instagram at Down the Garden Path Podcast. It's also the same handle at Down the Garden Path Podcast for our Facebook. Continue the discussion there and send us your pictures and questions, and we can follow you off the air as well. Don't forget to Google Down the Garden Path, Google or search Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app. There's plenty of past shows, years of past shows, covering all sorts of fantastic topics with down to earth tips and tricks, to steal Joanne's tagline there,
Mhm.
uh, about your garden and different subject matter. So definitely check us out there. Joanne, if they needed to get a hold of you, where are they going to find you?
They can find me on my website at which is down2earth.ca, with starting with the number 2. So down2earth.ca, and all my social media links are there, as well as my email. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love for you to follow us on Instagram or join our Facebook group. So definitely. And
That's right.
Matt, where can they find you?
You can find me at naturalaffinitydesigns.ca. And again, my email and all my social media links are there as well. So, yeah, let us know if we can be of help.
That's right. And we thank everybody once again for joining us here on Down the Garden Path, live on Reality Radio 101. Thank you to our listeners. And Matt, you always are good about writing everybody's name down.
I do. So, thank you, Brian, Claudette, Emma, Gwen, Holly, John, and Ken. Thank you for writing in. And as always,
Mhm.
thank you, Gary, for helping us produce here on Reality Radio 101.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your hosts Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.